Good evening. Thanks very much for that irreverent introduction. I'd like to thank Danny Rothschild and the other organizers for hosting the Herzliya Conference and for inviting me to this very prestigious event and to offer some insights about America's strategy in the new Middle East. This is my first time at Herzliya. I'm very glad I came this year. The timing was quite fortuitous, and this conference certainly has lived up to its reputation. Now, it's an old diplomatic cliche to start a speech by saying that we're dealing with a mixture of continuity and change. Well, right now we're all focused on change, the dramatic events in Egypt, Tunisia, and the other parts of the Middle East over the past couple of weeks, which have potentially far-reaching implications for the region. But in these uncertain times, it's important not to forget about the elements of continuity in our policies and in our strategic interests. With that in mind, what I'd like to do today is not only describe how we are adjusting to some of the changing dynamics in the region, but also explore areas where U.S. and Israeli interests and strategies have not and should not fundamentally change. The first thing that stayed very much the same is the American commitment to preserving a secure and democratic Jewish state of Israel. Israel and the United States continue to share a host of common challenges that threaten to destabilize the Middle East and fundamentally undermine American and Israeli security. It's been said many times, but it's worth repeating, that the United States' deep and unwavering commitment to Israel's security is unshakable. Our deep historical and cultural connection with the Israeli people forms the basis of a unique and lasting commitment between our two nations. The United States has been Israel's strongest ally since its founding nearly 63 years ago, and Israel has been America's most steadfast ally in the Middle East. Moreover, as Governor Barbour said, we're not just allies, we're friends, and friends for the long haul. From the beginning of the Obama administration, it's been a priority to ensure that our defense relationship with Israel is stronger than ever, and today it is. This commitment is not simply one of words, but of policies and actions that this administration has taken to make Israel stronger and the Israeli people safer. The most notable aspect of our support for Israel's security is foreign military financing. In 2011 alone, the United States will provide Israel with over $3 billion in aid, more than we provide any other nation in the world. But our commitment is far more than financial resources. It's also predicated upon maintaining Israel's qualitative military edge by ensuring that it has the ability to counter and defeat any credible military threat in the region. The United States has for over 2 decades been working to improve the protection of Israel's population from the very real and urgent threat of rockets and missiles by partnering with Israel to develop an extensive ballistic missile defense architecture. Most recently, the President and Secretary Gates requested that Congress provide Israel with an additional $205 million on top of the support Israel already receives for the production of Iron Dome, a short-range rocket defense system. Now, arguably more important than all these programs are the enduring relationships that our senior leaders have forged, which have resulted in a rock-solid foundation of trust. It's clear that we're stronger when we confront threats together. Now, another challenge that hasn't changed is Iran. Iran's pursuit of nuclear weapons poses a grave threat to the security of Israel and the Middle East. On this point, there should be no question. The United States is determined to prevent Iran from developing nuclear weapons. We are working closely with our international partners and have implemented tough new sanctions that have surprised Tehran with their effectiveness and increased the pressure on the Iranian leadership. We have also taken other steps to make it more difficult for Iran to obtain the materials it requires to pursue a nuclear weapon. Ultimately, these efforts are having the effect of delaying Iran's nuclear progress while also painting as clear a picture as possible that Tehran must meet its international obligations or face increasing pressure and isolation. As has been discussed throughout this conference, the challenge of Iran is not just a nuclear challenge. Iran continues to support extremist groups such as Hezbollah and Hamas, and its support for Shia proxy groups in Iraq is a destabilizing factor. These activities not only threaten regional stability, but also spur violent extremism. The United States will continue to pursue a policy of countering violent extremism and containing and limiting Iranian influence throughout the Middle East. Now, the threat from Iran has created a unique opportunity. For the first time since the founding of the State of Israel, Israeli and Arab national interests are aligned to an unprecedented degree, based on the shared conviction that Iran's influence must be countered and contained. The situation in Egypt has not changed this fundamental geopolitical reality. Now, a comprehensive Middle East peace would only strengthen this growing trend. For both Israelis and Palestinians, and indeed for all the people of the region, it's in their interest to end this conflict and bring a just, lasting, and comprehensive peace to the Middle East based on two states for two peoples. Now, the United States also has a major role to play in reinforcing the convergence of interests among moderate states in the region that I just mentioned. As a country that has strong security relationships with both Israel and the Gulf states, the United States is uniquely positioned to build a strong coalition against Iran throughout the Middle East. Through our security assistance programs, we're working with our Gulf state partners to do precisely that. We're developing a common security architecture, one that includes both bilateral and multilateral security initiatives. These include a regional network of air and ballistic missile defenses, shared early warning systems, counterterrorism and counter-piracy efforts, programs to build partner capacity, and projects to harden and protect our partners' critical infrastructure. We currently have substantial missile defense assets in a number of Gulf partner nations, and U.S. Central Command maintains a robust exercise schedule in the region, as well as a sizable force presence. These are intended to reaffirm in concrete fashion our commitment to our partners. We also maintain a full schedule of bilateral and multilateral engagements with our Gulf state counterparts, going up to the highest levels. Secretary Gates, Chairman Mullen, and our senior military commanders all travel to the region frequently or host their counterparts in Washington. So taken together, we hope that these activities will make it absolutely clear to Iran that its pursuit of nuclear weapons will make it less, not more, secure. Now I'd like to address an area where things in the region do seem to be fundamentally changing, and that is the way in which the United States is now balancing our vital interest in maintaining regional stability with standing up for our universal values. This is not a zero-sum proposition as it has been presented by many speakers during this conference. In fact, we believe that stability and political freedom are mutually reinforcing. I think Secretary Clinton expanded on this point very eloquently at the Munich Security Conference this weekend when she said, and I quote, "Leaders in the region may be able to hold back the tide for a little while, but not for long. The status quo is simply not sustainable. For all our friends in the region, including governments and people, the challenge is to help our partners take systematic steps to usher in a better future where people's voices are heard, their rights respected, and their aspirations met. This is not simply a matter of idealism. It's a strategic necessity. Without genuine progress toward open and accountable political systems, the gap between people and their governments will only grow, and instability will only deepen." This policy, as Secretary Clinton outlined it, takes different forms in different countries. In Iraq, even as we complete our military drawdown, we remain fully engaged in helping the Iraqis establish a just, representative, and accountable government. Late last year, Iraq formed a government that includes all of the country's major groups. The United States played a decisive role in the government formation negotiations, helping Iraqi leaders develop a platform of political reforms that were voted on and approved in conjunction with the new governing coalition. We also continue to assist in the development of Iraq's government institutions, as Iraq's elections in 2009 and 2010 indicated the Iraqi public's strong desire for a government that can meet its needs. Iraq's young democracy is becoming increasingly robust, and together with a long-term strategic partnership with the United States, Iraq promises to be a force for peace and security integrated into the region and the international community on the basis of mutual interests, mutual respect, and moderation. Now, in the case of recent events in Egypt, these interests have caused us to pursue three fundamental principles. First, we oppose violence and commend the Egyptian military for the professionalism and restraint it has shown while protecting the Egyptian people as they carry out peaceful protests. The military has been a stable pillar within Egyptian society for decades, and its natural ties with the people of Egypt are undeniable. Second, we have stood for universal values, including the rights of the Egyptian people to freedom of assembly, freedom of speech, and freedom to access information. And third, we have spoken out on behalf of the need for credible political and economic reform, and we've emphasized that an orderly transition is needed, and that it must be meaningful and peaceful, and that it must begin now. We're stressing to all parties the need to reach a negotiated solution that brings the unrest to an end and creates a clear path toward transition. President Obama has made clear that a transition with credible, inclusive negotiations is vital for the stability of Egypt and the region. We've discussed with the Egyptians a variety of ways to move that process forward by following through on the specific commitments that they have made, such as ending the arrest and harassment of journalists and political and civil society activists, releasing political prisoners, lifting the emergency law, and introducing legal and constitutional changes and other concrete steps toward free and fair elections. Now, of course, all these decisions must be made by the Egyptian people. We are not dictating outcomes or timelines, but we are supporting a transition that is responsive to their aspirations for democratic change. These discussions are ongoing. The more the Egyptian people see the national dialogue as being meaningful, the more likely it is to lead to understandings and pave the way for long-term stability. Now, we fully understand that it's critical that Egypt remain a steady pillar in the Middle East and continue to contribute to the sustainability of peace and the fight against terror. And we believe that such an outcome will be made more likely by the kind of transition that I just described. Trying to hold on to an inexorably changing status quo is far more likely to lead to instability and radicalism. A strong Egyptian military, buttressed by robust defense relations with the United States, can be a force for moderation and for continued support of the peace treaty with Israel as Egypt makes the transition. And as we help Egypt to make this important transition, we will continue to focus on ours and Israel's common interests, including Israel's security, the peace treaty, and stability in the region. So in conclusion, I'd just like to reiterate that the United States and Israeli interests have not fundamentally changed. We continue to share common goals, and we face a host of common challenges that have the risk of destabilizing the Middle East and undermining U.S. and Israeli security, but challenges that can be overcome if our two countries continue to work together along with like-minded partners. There's no doubt that a strong U.S.-Israeli relationship will remain a force for peace and security in the new Middle East. Thank you very much.